Okay. Good afternoon, Council. Good afternoon, Senior Leadership Team, and good afternoon, residents and presenters, I believe. We have here, this is a special COW Committee of the Whole meeting under the public meeting under the Planning Act. First of all, I will ask Council to adopt the agenda. And I have here a motion put forward by Councilor Hildebrand that the agenda for the February 10th, 2020 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Okay. All those against? Motion carries. So we have here, so planning, disclosure of pecuniary interest, of course, and general nature thereof. Is there any member of council that has to declare an interest? Not seeing any. I ask the clerk to please note that. And then we have the first application will be AM-08-19, 1409 Station Street. And before we continue any further, I have a notice to read. A zoning bylaw amendment to permit the use of the property for blocked townhouses and/or apartment dwellings. Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on January 17th, 2020. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. There is an attendance list on the table, which we would ask all present to print their name and complete mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision by council. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the town of Pelham to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person, public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. Thank you.
So planning will do that.
So now, a member of the planning department will make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. The application before us tonight pertains to 1409 Station Street. The property is located on the north side of Summersides Boulevard, and the east side of Station Street. The requested zoning change will allow block townhouse dwellings as well as apartment dwellings on the property and subject to special regulations. And it should be noted that the application for zoning bylaw amendment only pertains to the back portion of the property. The front portion of the property containing the existing single detached dwelling is currently zoned R2. It will remain R2. The zoning change would only apply to the rear portion of the lands. And it's the intention of the applicant to apply for a severance in the future to separate the two parcels. The applicant has provided two different concept plans that depict what the requested zoning change could facilitate on the property. The first concept shows 24 apartment or two 24-unit apartment dwellings, and they're both 3-story. These would require future Planning Act applications such as site plan or draft plan of condominium. At that point, issues such as access and servicing, landscaped areas, amenity spaces, that type of thing would be further reviewed to ensure that this development could function and that it generally fits in harmony with the neighborhood. The second concept is block townhouse dwellings, a total of 38. Again, further approvals would be required under the Planning Act, such as site plan or draft plan of condominium, where all of the site details would be reviewed. The land use planning framework for the property includes being within the settlement area, according to the provincial policy statement, and within the delineated built-up area of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Settlement areas are intended to be the focus of growth and new development and include a mix of uses, housing types, and densities that efficiently use land and infrastructure. And the growth plan requires that 50% of all new residential development occur within the delineated built-up areas. Intensification is generally encouraged throughout this area. The region's official plan designates this property as being within the urban area boundary and built up. Residential and employment intensification is encouraged, and the minimum residential intensification rate in the town of Pelham is 15%. The town's official plan designates the property as East Fonthill medium density residential, and a small strip of the northern portion of the property is designated East Fonthill low density residential. There is a policy in the official plan that indicates that the boundaries on the schedules are conceptual. They don't follow property lines, and so in this case it's appropriate to interpret the designation as being fully East Fonthill medium density residential. And the East Fonthill medium density residential designation permits a variety of different residential uses, including townhouses, small scale apartment dwellings, accessory apartments, live-work units, seniors housings, a variety of uses. The current zoning on the property, it's R2 along Station Street and agricultural on the rear portion of the lands, and the request is to go to a site-specific RM1 zone that would permit the block townhouses and apartment dwellings. There are a number of site-specific requests with this application as well. In terms of the apartment dwellings, there is a request for a 30-meter frontage along Summersides Boulevard, an increased density from 65 to 75 units per hectare, a minimum density of 35 units per hectare, a reduction to the maximum building height from 5 stories to 3 stories, an increase in the maximum lot coverage from 30 to 40%, a reduction in the minimum front yard from half the building height, or 7.5 meters, down to 3 meters, a reduction to the rear yard from half the building height, or 6 meters, down to 3 meters, a reduction to the minimum landscaped area from 35 to 30%, adding a requirement for the parking area to be located behind the building, and finally a reduction to the minimum parking aisle width from 7.5 to 6.2 meters. The site-specific requests for the block townhouse dwellings are an increase in the maximum density from 35 units to 60 units per hectare, the addition of a minimum density of 20 units per hectare, a reduced minimum front yard from 7.5 to 3 meters with a recessed garage at 6 meters, a reduced side yard from 4.5 meters to 1.5 meters, a reduced rear yard from 7.5 meters to 6 meters, a setback of 3 meters between buildings. Excuse me. I'm drying out with all these requests, Peter. The addition of a requirement that buildings orient. Oh boy. I'm going to let you all read that. There were a number of comments that were received. The region is not opposed to the application, subject to a holding symbol for further archaeological work. Building and utilities offered no comments or conditions. Town Public Works outlined technical requirements for future studies and servicing. Planning, town planning has identified some concerns with the official plan. There is a requirement for a developer's group agreement for the subdivision of land. There's also the requirement for a neighborhood master plan to be developed for neighborhoods. The demonstration plans contained in Appendix A to the official plan. I apologize, everybody. Show a north-south road connection on the property connecting to properties to the north. There were a lot of comments received from the public on this. Randy Jaworski, hope that was right, Randy, and Marley Prue. They opposed the 3-story apartment building use. They've experienced negative impacts due to ongoing construction in the area. And they're concerned about the impacts on their privacy, their view, and their property values. Bill Heska objects to the application. He's concerned and questions the design and function of the development. Robert and Mary Tucker are concerned about the changing character and impacts, such as traffic and noise, resulting from the development. They're concerned about College Street being used as a bypass for vehicles, and especially traffic problems during special events. And generally, they're upset about the loss of agricultural land to development. Webb Planning Consultants has provided comments that the development conflicts with official plan policies and will prejudice orderly development of adjoining area and lands. Upper Canada Consultants, on behalf of Mountain View Homes, has indicated that the application is premature and they request council not approve it. They feel that the concepts are not consistent with the approved demonstration plans, and they're concerned about the impact on future access and servicing of lands. River Realty also wrote a letter to say that the concept designs do not conform with other developments underway and it's premature. In conclusion, sure. Did I miss one? Oh, I apologize. Those came after this presentation was provided, and so I couldn't make alterations to it. You will receive a full copy of those comments with the recommendation report, and some of them may be in your package already. But I just wanted to make sure that I did highlight them because they did arrive before now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So no decisions or recommendations about this application will be made tonight. After we review all the comments, staff will prepare a recommendation report for council's decision at a later date. And if anyone wishes to receive notice on this application in the future, please sign the sheet, or if you've provided comments already, we have your contact information. And we're of course available to answer questions tonight. And following this meeting, if anyone wishes to send comments or questions in writing, they can send them to Shannon LaRock, Senior Planner. Thanks for bearing with me while I suffered through that. Tried.
So this portion of the meeting now we turn over to council.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if council wishes to ask the planner questions now, they may. However, the applicant is also provided an opportunity to speak next, and then the public.
So.
Now they don't have access to the property north of that.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, the demonstration plans that were prepared for the East Fonthill neighborhood did illustrate a road fabric. That demonstration plan is attached to the piece of correspondence from Webb Consulting. And you can see on this demonstration plan that there would be two north-south streets coming off of Summersides in this general vicinity. And so that has certainly been an issue, and that's been something that's been raised by Webb Consultants as well as Upper Canada Consultants in their comments to on this application.
So for you, Mr. Mayor, so the DeFazio group has to subsidize or give away land so the other developers could have their property or home? Like, I don't understand why everyone's upset with this. They purchased the house, they want to do like every other developer, develop their properties, and then everyone gets all excited because now they don't have roads going through their properties. I just don't get this.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, the secondary plan, through these demonstration plans, contemplated a road and lot fabric as well as servicing and traffic dispersion and movements and connectivity through the neighborhoods. That was the vision for this secondary plan and the policy basis for many of the policies that are in the secondary plan. Secondary plan speaks to development applications being consistent with the these demonstration plans. They also speak to the need for a developers group agreement so that we can deal with things like shared accesses and benefiting property owners to accesses, as well as the ability to service these lands efficiently and so forth. So that's the premise under which the secondary plan was prepared. That's the premise under which developers who were part of the secondary plan understood that the secondary plan would be rolled out in terms of development applications.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So those two roads, how much would that consist of his property? Is it 20%, 30%? If they decide to allow roads to go through their property, how much is he giving up?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I don't know. I can't answer specifically. I haven't done that calculation. There is, again, the plan is based on efficient use of land and looking at the area in totality, not individual parcels. So that's how the demonstration plan and the secondary plan was developed. It was to look at how can we efficiently use this land with efficient use of roads and services and provide for the connectivity and the integration of land uses that the secondary plan contemplates.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, Council. No, that's fine. Can you please turn your mic on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that means this small developer would have to lose value of his property. So if we allow the other one, he's got 48 homes and 36 or 38. But if we went to the original plan, his footprint would be a lot less than what he proposed.
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, conceivably there could be fewer dwelling units developed on this site. However, the plans envision you looking at the area in its entirety, not on an individual lot by lot basis. And that's been the challenge with this. We've encouraged the developers to form a development group and provide one plan that looks at multiple lots, multiple properties, so that we can get that efficiencies in the use of land and the efficiencies in terms of how the land will be developed and serviced. And again, we are, the plan speaks to looking at developments being done comprehensively and using a comprehensive approach as opposed to individual parcels. That being said, all we're dealing with tonight is the zoning. We're not dealing with an actual development plan.
And one question, with the original plan, does he have access to Summerside? Would there be cars allowed to be parked on Summerside, similar to what's further down on the east side? We took up the curves and we put new curves in to allow parking?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, as we move forward with the development plan, yes, it would be contemplated that there would be on-street parking along Summersides. That's been part of the design of the entire length of Summersides, is to provide for on-street parking. As development happens and we know where the streets are going to go and the intersections are going to go, then we can plan on the on-street parking. That would be something that we would look at a future development plan for these lands.
And my last question, there's a plan that we don't have to go, the original plan, we don't have to put two streets. We could go beside and use more of Mountain View's property instead of the DeFazio's property. Is there a plan for that? Instead of moving it to the east side and moving the road there, and that will have access to properties on the north side. Could we do that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, we'd be looking at understanding what that impact is on Mountain View's lands. Mountain View is also wants to develop their lands, and we need to ensure that the roads line up and they work for everybody. And that's something that we will be doing once we receive actual development plans. You'll recall when River Estates Phase 2 was registered, it set the location for that one north-south road. And so you'd want to ensure that your streets align and you have proper intersections, and those would be things that we would be looking for moving forward.
Any other questions? Councillor Weeks. So,
through you, Mr. Mayor. So, Ms. Weens, when was the secondary plan of East Font Hill developed?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the secondary plan was developed. It was developed over many years. It was finally adopted by council in 2012 and approved by the region in 2014. So it's been in place for some 6 years now.
So this demonstration plan along with the secondary plan has been in place for 6 years. When did the property owners purchase this property?
I would say within the last year and a half.
So they bought this property knowing full well what the demonstration plan was.
Well, I can't speak for them, but certainly this information was made available to them and public in terms of what the official plan states and the demonstration plans.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Okay, so not seeing any. We will now open the meeting to any. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. So I should look at the. There we go. Yes, there we go. So now we have the. Thank you. We now have the applicant to make a presentation, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the presentation, Shen. I apologize for the number of provisions, but I'll hopefully go through the same and answer any questions related to this application.
All right. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Wink that committee receives this Department of Community Planning and Development report for information as it pertains to file number AM-08-2019 relating to 1409 Station Street, together with the Planning Department presentation, and that committee directs planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. Any questions or discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Director.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you should probably also hear from the public to see if
Yeah.
there are any other public comments.
Okay. Okay, we jumped a step.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So we'll leave this for now then. And we will go back to the agenda, and we'll now have allow for public input on this. And we ask you to approach the mic and state your name, please.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is William Haikupa. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants. Here tonight representing Mountain View Homes. As you heard, the owner of the lands that abut 1409 Station Street to the east. I hope you had a chance to read my letter that was submitted on Friday. I really have two issues, and they've been talked about a little bit tonight. But our main concern is the exclusion of the north-south road that has been identified in the East Fonthill secondary plan. These two main connections have previously been planned and identified in the demonstration plans. The objective of these demonstration plans is to implement development in a manner that is consistent and orderly and is done in an efficient way. And this is to be coordinated with the adjacent landowners. The demonstration plans provided by the applicant, in my opinion, do not satisfy the secondary plan policies in an appropriate manner, as they have ignored these two connections and have suggested changes to the demonstration plan. This change of having a crescent road for the properties to the north has a large impact on the surrounding properties and their ability to conform with the secondary plan, and namely the efficient development of the important road pattern, pedestrian connections, and municipal servicing connections. Through the River Estates Phase 2 planning process, plans were provided to the municipality to demonstrate their conformance with the overall demonstration plans. Furthermore, River Estates Phase 2 has been registered at this time. The alignment of that roadway is very important, and its current orientation is that it would be located on the east side, directly abutting Mountain View's lands, to have a full 20-meter right-of-way. If that connection or orientation is changed, the ability to get a full intersection there with the proper geometric standards, turning movements, signalization or stopping controls are a concern. Secondly, this roadway exclusion precludes the necessary servicing connections that the town has already implemented along Summersides Boulevard. When the town constructed Summersides Boulevard, it did so in conjunction with the East Fonthill secondary plan. The servicing connections were sized and established for the whole development area, including this site and the properties to the north and Mountain View lands to the east. These works were front-ended by the town. If the road connections are not completed, my client's lands and these other lands to the north will not be able to adequately service to the existing connections. And this will have a large impact on the town's ability to recoup costs front-ended for these lands with the necessary service. The comments in the information report provided you tonight noted contributions in the range of $160,000. If these connections are not completed now, there certainly will be a loss of paying back from the other landowners, as they're not going to be able to fully service those lands through the properly sized Summersides Boulevard. And I hope you can refer to the second page of my letter, where I showed the servicing drainage area plans associated with that infrastructure. We understand the owners of the land want to move forward with development. So does my client. We are certainly not against it. However, we feel these are important issues that need to be resolved from a land use perspective, as they are specific to the East Hill Secondary Plan. And my client looks forward to working together with the applicants and the owners in enabling a development to happen in a manner that is consistent with the secondary plan and equal and fair for all the landowners. Everyone's got to pay their own share. So thank you for your considerations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any other presenters from the public? Your name, please, sir, and then we can continue. presentation? And now, anyone else? Thank you, sir, and just state your name and continue. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I don't think we take questions right now. Wait.
Yes,
Wait.
through you, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me for a minute, please. To the clerk. Do we take questions on the presentation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if council wishes, then council of presenters.
Councillor Court.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned about the 10 properties on Station Street, and your client owns 2 of those properties, and there's 8 remaining. What happens to those residents that don't want to sell? And what do we do as a council that next spring somebody wants to put a pool in the backyard on the property where the road is? Are we going to say, no, you can't do that because we're worried about our developers that, you know, they're going to put a road in there sometime? So are we all looking at big ifs here? But there's 8 other people there. So we're asking those other 8 people to give up their properties for developers. Is that what we're doing?
Through your worship. Effectively, you can't control what people do on their properties that don't have applications before you. They may not want to develop. But the applications that are before you represents the opportunity for will they in any way prejudice the plan? For my earlier comment, it's difficult, it takes time. This is fragmented ownership, there's 10 parcels in total. But as you make decisions on the matters that come before you, it's important that each and every one of those applications be judged against the policies in the secondary plan, and in this case, in the demonstration plan, so that yes, you are making sure that fundamentally you do not prejudice plan development.
Any other questions to the presenter? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any other presenters? Good evening, sir. Please identify yourself and continue.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and staff. My name is Stephen Kaiser, and I'm here on behalf of the owners at 1419 and 1423 Station Street. As you're aware, the application before you tonight in regards to 1409 Station Street directly relates to the East Fonthill Secondary Plan, which was completed in 2012. There are very few of us in the room tonight that were part of that process. However, I was one of them. The process to complete the secondary plan took almost 10 years in total. However, my involvement was over the last half of that process. Historically, the town had come forward with a secondary plan that some of the local property owners had concerns with, as it lacked the required background studies. And as a result, the town placed the burden on the landowners to complete the work and the studies required to bring a secondary plan forward. A group of landowners came forward after every landowner in the secondary plan was invited to come and participate in the process to develop a secondary plan for the area and pay their proportionate share based on land ownership. At the end of the day, only 4 landowners stepped up to the plate and began the process working with the town and their consultants planning partnership to complete the town's East Fonthill secondary plan. Those landowners were Fonthill Gardens, River Realty, Arbor Developments, and Sterling Realty. I was retained by them as their consultant to coordinate the process on their behalf. The process was long and it was arduous, costing the 4 landowners over $1 million in total that was later recouped from the town when the process was completed. Numerous studies were completed which were part of the process of formalizing this document, along with the various included plans such as the demonstration plan, which you have a copy of in Mr. Webb's presentation. As a group working with Ron Palmer from Planning Partnership in the town, we spent a great deal of effort and discussion regarding the residential neighborhood section of the plan, section B1.7.7. The intent of the discussion at that time was described in the words of the adopted plan. The intent was that neighborhoods would be developed in concert in a manner set out in the secondary plan. The zoning bylaw amendment you are reviewing tonight clearly does not do that. In lay terms, it's like taking a piece of a 100-piece puzzle and trying to fit in a missing space of another 100-piece puzzle. It simply does not fit and was not made to be there. If you take a look at Mr. Webb's, or the demonstration plan, that you have a copy of Mr. Webb's presentation, and reflect on what has been constructed to date in the plan, it is almost identical. All of this was done before a shovel went into the ground anywhere in this 500-acre plan. It is not coincidental that Wellspring Way is exactly where it is designated in the demonstration plan, that the stormwater ponds in the area north of Port Robinson Road are exactly where they are demonstrated in the plan, that Summerside is exactly where it's shown in the demonstration plan, that the roundabouts in Summerside are constructed almost exactly in the location that they are noted on the plan, and it's not coincidental that the road fabric of River Estates, both Phase 1 and Phase 2, is almost identical to the plan. This section of the secondary plan was set out purposefully to allow orderly development in the various areas of the plan. Is this situation unique to the town of Pelham in terms of a plan dictating development and road patterns? The answer is no. The area called Lot 177 in the town, which is bordered by South Pelham Street, Bacon Lane, Line Avenue, and Quaker Road, this area is governed by a very similar plan to the Final East secondary plan, which sets out how the block could be developed as it moves forward in the future. There are properties that still could be developed in Lot 177. However, they must be developed in conjunction with adjoining properties in an orderly fashion, not compromising the overall framework of the plan. You've heard the planning arguments from two planners, Mr. Highcoop and Mr. Webb. I guess one might ask, why are we here and why haven't we worked with Mr. Colosimo and his clients? The answer is that we certainly have attempted to over the last 2 years, to no avail. I knew Mr. Colosimo when he worked at the region and had a good working relationship. And the DeFazios, who are the applicant, go back to when my wife and their father coached soccer together here in Font Hill. It amazes me that we wasted 2 years when we could have collectively brought forward a draft plan that embraces with it all the criteria set out in the secondary plan, with zoning being just one of the components. We have met collectively a number of times with the applicant in various locations, even at a meeting facilitated by the town's planner, Barb Waynes, here in this very room. All of this in an effort to work together and come up with a plan that works to facilitate the development of other adjoining properties in the plan. To date, they have only come up with plans that solely benefit the development of their property, and that's not how the East Font Hill secondary plan was contemplated or defined. This whole area needs to be looked at in its entirety and not as an individual parcel. Candidly, I am surprised that the town sold the parcel of land fronting on Summersides to the applicant without ensuring that their proposed development would follow the direction set out in the secondary plan. In conclusion, you may ask, why not let the zoning proceed and the plan be refined at a later date and process? The answer is confirmed that any right to appeal a further application by the applicant from neighboring property owners to the LPAT, or the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, is lost. It simply is not allowed. The horse will effectively be out of the barn. And here Mr. Colosimo allude to, well, we may come later with a plan of condominium. Well, that once the zoning is in place and the plan conforms to the zoning, the appeal rights of the adjoining property owners are gone. The current application before you is insular. It lacks most of the prerequisites set out in the secondary plan, and is by that criteria a piece of the puzzle that simply does not fit in the East Font Hill secondary plan. It is clearly not, in the wordings from the official plan, generally consistent with the demonstration plan, and is an attempt by one landowner to maximize development on their property while disregarding the fundamental principles of the document that is a culmination of numerous studies enshrining a vision for the town at the time it was implemented. This secondary plan and official plan, although adopted by a previous council, are currently the planning rules for this secondary plan area in our town. Mr. Colosimo in his concluding remarks, and it's left right up here, said the proposed zoning bylaw amendment meets all the provincial, regional, and town policies and plans. It clearly does not. Hopefully these comments are helpful and will allow you an informed decision at a later date when you vote regarding this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaiser. We did allow questions for the last presenter. It's only fair that any questions for Mr. Kaiser?
Be happy to answer them.
Not seeing any? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the public that want to address us, make a statement? Once, twice, 3 times. Okay, thank you. So now we go to committee comments, committee input. Any member of council wish to speak on what you have heard tonight? No? Not seeing any? Then I guess we'll call this motion. That committee, so I have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. That committee received report number 2020-11 for information as it pertains to 1409 Station Street, file number AM-08-19, and recommend to council that council direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this application for consideration. Any questions or comments on this motion? Not seeing any, I'll call it to question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
This is for the applicant's presentation.
Okay, so now, so I'll read this. No.
Yep, you can read that.
You
Go
want to read
ahead.
this now? Okay. Motion put forward by Councilor Wink. Applicant's presentation, that committee received the applicant's presentation for information. Is that the one we just had? Was this the one that's going up?
No, this is for the one that we just had.
Oh, okay. I thought we just did that. Okay. Anyway, so the committee received the applicant's presentation for information. Any comments, questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
And this is to receive the public comments, the written and public comments we received.
Okay. So this is for the public input. That committee received the written correspondence from Randy Sawerski and Marley Poulot and Bill Heska, Upper Canada Consultants and Web Planning Consultants. And that committee received any verbal presentations made by the public. Any comments, questions? Councillor Trophy.
I believe there's one more. I believe there's one more that's going to come to us, correct? From River Realty, is it? Yeah, so there's one more, Mr. Mayor, you should note in there.
Oh, clerk, can you note that, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will work with the planning department to ensure that you get copies of those comments that were provided.
Will we amend that then, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point in time, you haven't received them. They will be part of the next, the planning department report. I will provide you copies of the document as well, hopefully perhaps tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so now we move on to, I have to say this again?
This is for the second application.
Yes. Okay, that's why I have to say this.
Yeah, because it's for the second application.
Okay, so we read this again. Planning Act requires, under Section 3412, that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy these requirements. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject land on January 15th, 2020. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed amendment to the town zoning bylaw number 1136, 1987, as amended. In addition to providing information on the applications, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. There is an attendance form on the table, which we would ask all present to clearly print their name and complete mailing address for the application they attended for, if they wish to be notified of the decision by council. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the town of Pelham to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration.
Presentation.
Yep. Now the planning department will make their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second zoning bylaw amendment application before you tonight is regarding 695 Quaker Road. The property is located on the south side of Quaker Road, west of Clare Avenue. And this property has recently been the subject of a committee of adjustment application for consent. The consent application was to add the rear portion of the lands to 701 Quaker Road for future development purposes. And the front portion of the lands is to be retained for single detached residential use. And that is, so there are two actual zoning proposals on this property. This is the severance sketch that better depicts which portions of the lands were to be merged with 701 Quaker Road versus which are to remain as 695. So there will be a site-specific R2 zone that will retain the single detached dwelling use and also allow a second dwelling unit in accordance with regional and provincial policies. Part 2, the rear portion of the lands, would be rezoned to an RM1 to 81H zone, which is the same zoning that 701 Quaker Road currently has. That zone permits semi-detached and townhouse dwelling units, block townhouse dwelling units. That requires future Planning Act applications such as site plan and draft plan of condominium. The holding provision that exists on the land is related to archaeological clearance, so it requires sign-off from the Ministry of Culture prior to any development taking place. In terms of provincial policy, the property is located within a settlement area, and that's where intensification and redevelopment is encouraged, along with a variety of residential, commercial, institutional types of uses. The region's official plan designates the property as urban and within the built-up area. This is where 15% of all residential intensification in the town is supposed to occur. The town's official plan designates the property urban living area and built boundary. It permits a variety of residential uses, as well as neighborhood commercial uses. And the town's zoning bylaw currently zones the property R1, which permits one single detached dwelling, accessory buildings, and home occupations. The proposal would be to take the front portion of the property to R2, which still permits a single detached dwelling, add the permission for 1 second dwelling unit. It would still permit accessory buildings and structures and home occupations. And then the rear portion would go to that residential multiple 1-281H zone to permit the block townhouse dwellings and semi-detached dwellings. And the holding symbol would ensure that no development took place until the ministry cleared it for archaeological resource. That RM 1-281H zone included a number of different site-specific requirements related to setbacks from property lines, between buildings on the lot, planting strip. These were all approved as part of a rezoning application for 701 Quaker Road back in 2017. In terms of comments, not many were received on this application. No comments were received from any members of the public as of right now. And the region had, of course, requested that the archaeological resources be dealt with either through a holding provision or some sort of future development application. They've indicated that the rezoning aligns with provincial and regional policies, and they have no objections. Town Public Works didn't provide comments at this stage. They will provide detailed engineering review during later development applications once the actual layout of the plan is known. And Enbridge Gas has given no objections. Planning staff is, of course, available to answer questions tonight. And following this meeting, if there are written questions or correspondence, it can be directed to Curtis Thompson in the Planning Department.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Any members of council have questions for the Planning Department? Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. So you're asking us to divide the one large property, part 1 and part 2. The original property or dwelling, is it going to be torn down?
Mr. Mayor, through you, it is my understanding that the original dwelling is going to remain.
My question is to the director. So what stops other people in our community, especially on Pancake Lane, to do the same thing? Because there's enough property to do what they're doing here in the front of Pancake Lane. If we allow it once, are we accepting it moving forward?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I mean, each application is reviewed and looked at independently on the merits of that application. This is an area along Quaker Road where we have existing single detached residential dwellings with very large, deep lots. And there are developers that are coming forward and are looking at consolidating kind of the backs of these large lots to provide for opportunities for infill or intensification behind that. Future plans in terms of the future development plan, whether it's through a site plan or condominium plan, will still come back to council for approval. And again, you'll be reviewing that development on the merits of that application at that time.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I could see the gentleman eventually buy the other property on the corner of Quaker and Clare Street. But my point is this what our community, this is where we're going with our community, is these large lots that originally had septic tanks that are sitting on half acre or quarter acres, and now people are coming out of town, or developers are coming and saying, let's maximize our profits by dividing these properties. And I just don't like it. I think our community is better than this. And
so, Mr. Mayor, through you, this, of course, is supported by various policies that encourage infill and intensification in our urban areas. I understand that, council may not like it, but this is the policy sets that we have and that we're required to work with. It ensures that the urban areas are developed efficiently and effectively to minimize sprawl and minimize the need for further expansions to our urban areas on prime agricultural lands. These are significant policy strategies that are aimed at protecting our agricultural lands, protecting our natural lands, but ensuring that we have efficient and effective development in our urban communities to create complete communities. And that's the policy framework that we work in. both from the provincial level, the regional level, and our town official plan policies.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Would this happen in Niagara-on-the-Lake? Would is there any bylaws in Niagara-on-the-Lake that would prohibit from this happening
Mr. Mayor,
on Niagara-on-the-Lake?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, there is the very similar types of development like this have happened in places in St. David's, in Virgil, and in certain areas in the Old Town in Niagara-on-the-Lake. These are the policy sets that every municipality is required to meet and conform with. It's happening all over, I'm afraid.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning. My concern is everything seems to be happening in a piecemeal function. We don't seem to get a comprehensive plan, and everyone comes with minor variance applications, and then they come with these other applications in front of council wanting us to make a decision. And I don't understand why there isn't a comprehensive plan put in place before all these come together.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, what is happening here is there's land consolidation happening. That needs to happen first, and then you will get the overall development plan for the townhouse development. So the developers, and in this case, this is a local developer. It's not a developer from out of town. These are local developers that are looking at these opportunities, and they need to sever off the existing house, consolidate it, and they're doing that by buying up 2 or 3 or 4 properties and doing that. And then you'll get a comprehensive plan coming forward. So this is one step in the process, and the only way you can create that severance is through a committee of adjustment application.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as you probably know, there's been other properties that the same thing has happened to, but what happens is it seems to go through a process of one person doing this type of work, and then the lot gets divided to another person, and then it just sits empty for a while. And it creates all kinds of problems with the residential properties adjoining these lands.
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, that has happened, unfortunately. As staff and as we don't have the control under when a developer will bring land on the market, all we can do is set up the framework for allowing it to happen. But when a developer actually has his development plan in place and his bringing that on the market, there are many variables in place that influence the timing on that. And this stuff does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, even you heard this evening with the East Font Hills plan, you know, that development, took 10 years in the making. The plan has been approved in 6 years, and it's, you know, it takes a number of years to see it and realize it. It doesn't happen all at once.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from a residential standpoint, the problem I have from residents is that the residents see these properties vacant or rented, and they're just a shambles in the midst of a very nice and expensive neighborhood.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I can't comment on that. You know, these are properties that may, in certain circumstances, be properties that are in transition. But ultimately, in the end, what you're going to see is reinvestment back into these properties. And that will help improve the neighborhood and allow for the positive impacts to happen from the development through the reinvestment.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any. The next step is the applicant presentation. So state your name, sir, and continue.
My name is Miles Week, Professional Land Use Planner with AJ Clark and Associates.
Thank you for that. Any questions for the representative of the applicant? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I understand, you're looking at doing a townhouse, ultimately a townhouse development, and how many,
Excuse me, Mike. Thank you.
a townhouse development?
So To reiterate, I believe what staff tried to articulate earlier is that this is really to facilitate land consolidation with the lands to the south. And so our client doesn't actually own the lands that are intended to be developed through this rezoning. They will, however, retain Part 1, which will be rezoned to the R2 zone, as has been mentioned earlier. And at this time, the existing dwelling is being retained, and so there's, at this moment, no immediate plans for development. Or there are plans, but it's not happening right away.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation. And at this time, we open it up to the public. Any public input? And state your name, sir, and continue.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, my name is William Haikupa, planner with Upper Canada Consultants, representing the landowner directly behind the subject site. So back in 2017, I went through a rezoning process for this site. I'm currently working with town staff and the owner to consolidate more land. One of the things that came up through our original applications was a stormwater outlet. So over the last 2 years, we've gone through a design process, we feel for a large part of the town's benefit along Quaker Road. So to fully realize this and to make it achievable from a financing and feasibility perspective, my client Homes from Antonio really felt that it was necessary to add more land. So the zoning you're seeing here tonight and the committee of adjustment approval that's been previously completed is to add to that land, and that zoning is identical to that. So we've come forward with 2 other committee of adjustment applications and are looking at a third, trying to put that bigger picture together. And I think tonight we have a step here that enables us to do that and continue to work with staff to develop a more comprehensive plan for this block as we want to establish those important connections, road network, and serviceability for that whole area. And I think everyone along Quaker Road is going to be benefiting from that. So just wanted to comment on those few little items, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
Okay, any other members of the public want to make a presentation? Going once, twice, 3 times? Thank you.
Council's in.
Oh, and now any member of council wish to make any comments, questions to the planning staff perhaps? Okay, and not seeing any. This one. Then we have a motion put forward by Councillor Trophy that committee receive report number 2020-0003, planning for information as it pertains to zoning bylaw amendment application file number AM-09-19-695 Quaker Road, and recommend to council that planning staff be directed to prepare the recommendation report for consideration of adopting the zoning bylaw amendment. Any comments on said? Not seeing any, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
The applicant's presentation.
Motion put forward by Councillor Kaur that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. Any comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? All those opposed? Seeing none.
Receiving public comments.
Okay. Also, a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn that committee receive verbal presentations made by the public. Any comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Stewart has put forward a motion that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. All those in favor? Any opposed? This meeting is done.